Long before trains moved goods quickly across the country, before schedules were precise and warehouses were organized, there lived a boy named Thomas Grayson. He was born in a small industrial town in northern England, near a few scattered factories and muddy streets. His family lived in a single damp room above a bakery that rarely had enough flour to bake. Thomas's father was a laborer at the docks, unloading crates from horse-drawn carts and small ships. His mother worked as a laundress for nearby workshops. Money was scarce, and the future felt heavier than the coal stacked along the harbor. From a young age, Thomas noticed how goods moved slowly, often being delayed for days or lost entirely. He saw merchants curse the delays, workers tire themselves in vain, and families wait weeks for supplies. Life was full of movement, but it lacked organization. One evening, while watching a small train clatter past the edge of town, Thomas realized the potential of the iron tracks. These trains could carry goods faster than carts. Yet the schedules were chaotic, tracks poorly managed, and shipments often delayed. In his mind, a spark ignited. He would build a system that moved goods efficiently, connecting towns and merchants, ensuring nothing was wasted. When Thomas turned 12, his father fell ill. Leaving him responsible for his younger siblings, he worked odd jobs at the docks and in small workshops, saving every coin. He spent nights studying the schedules of the few trains that ran through his town, memorizing departure times, routes, and bottlenecks. He realized that the biggest problem wasn't the lack of trains. It was poor planning and poor communication. Merchants lost money, workers lost time, and towns suffered. He began jotting down ideas on scraps of paper, imagining a network that would link towns, warehouses, and factories seamlessly. At 14, Thomas approached a small shipping company. They were desperate to move coal and textiles to nearby cities. He offered a simple plan. He would reorganize their loading schedules, optimize routes, and track shipments. The manager laughed at the boy, calling him a dreamer, but out of desperation agreed to let him try. Thomas worked tirelessly. He stayed at the docks from dawn until dusk, noting which crates were delayed, which routes were congested, and how workers could load and unload more efficiently. Within weeks, deliveries became faster, fewer goods were lost, and profits increased slightly. The manager was astonished and paid Thomas a small bonus. Word spread quietly through the shipping community. A boy who understood logistics better than adults. Thomas reinvested. By his 20s, he had saved enough to rent a small warehouse near the railway station. He began storing goods for merchants, tracking arrivals and departures, and creating schedules that ensured trains ran on time. He did not own trains yet, but he controlled information, organization, and timing. These were more valuable than ownership. Challenges were constant. Rival logistics planners mocked him. Older managers dismissed him. Rail schedules were unreliable, storms delayed trains, and some shipments were lost despite his best efforts. Thomas faced bankruptcy multiple times. Once, a flood destroyed his small warehouse, soaking all stored goods. He nearly gave up, but he remembered the hardships of his childhood, the hunger, the exhaustion, the feeling of helplessness when goods were delayed. He refused to quit. He began innovating. He introduced simple record-keeping systems using ledgers and charts. He trained workers to monitor cargo carefully, load efficiently, and communicate delays immediately. He negotiated with train operators to prioritize his shipments, showing them how organized planning increased revenue for everyone. Slowly, his reputation grew. Merchants trusted him. Factories preferred his services. The boy who once unloaded crates was now an indispensable part of trade. Thomas owned several warehouses and had contracts with multiple railway lines. He began purchasing small freight cars and leasing engines during peak seasons. He realized that by controlling both storage and transport, he could ensure goods moved without loss. His business was no longer just planning. It was full-service logistics. Factories and merchants no longer worried about delayed shipments. They trusted Thomas Grayson. Expansion to the United States became his next goal. He had studied American trade patterns, noting that cities were growing rapidly, but railroads were chaotic. Each railway company operated independently, with little coordination. Goods were frequently delayed, workers overextended, and merchants frustrated. Thomas saw an opportunity. He traveled to the U.S. with modest funds, enough to rent a small warehouse and a few freight cars. He faced immediate challenges. The railway networks were larger. The bureaucracy was harsher, and rival logistics firms were aggressive. Some tried to intimidate him. Others tried to steal clients by offering lower prices. But Thomas applied the lessons he had learned in England: organization, discipline, trust. He offered a service unlike any other: reliable delivery, careful tracking, and transparency. His reputation spread quickly. Factories along the East Coast began using his logistics system. He hired trustworthy managers, trained them in his method, and expanded warehouses in multiple cities. He coordinated with multiple railway companies, scheduling shipments to avoid delays. Within a decade, Thomas had built a logistics empire that connected ports, cities, factories, and markets. But Thomas never forgot his roots. He employed many young workers who, like him, had grown up poor. He trained them personally, teaching not only efficiency, but also integrity. He built modest housing near warehouses, ensuring workers had shelter and stability. His warehouses became places of opportunity, not just profit. Throughout his life, Thomas faced setbacks. Economic depressions slowed trade. Fires destroyed warehouses. Rival companies attempted sabotage. At times, he lost fortunes overnight. Yet each challenge made him stronger. He diversified services, added new routes, and created redundancies to protect shipments from unforeseen delays. His empire grew because he planned for failure. Thomas also innovated technology. He invested in stronger freight cars, better loading equipment, and early signaling systems to prevent accidents. He encouraged ideas from workers and engineers, creating a culture of problem-solving. By the time he reached his 50s, Thomas controlled one of the most reliable freight and logistics networks in both England and the United States. He became wealthy, but never ostentatious. His priority was not personal luxury, but the stability and growth of his business and the well-being of his employees. He believed that wealth was meaningless if it did not create opportunity. Generations of young men and women who worked under him rose from poverty, trained in discipline, problem-solving, and logistics. In the later years of his life, Thomas reflected on the journey. From carrying crates as a boy to controlling transatlantic shipments, he realized that success was built not on luck, strength, or connections alone, but on observation, discipline, and persistent problem-solving. The biggest opportunities he discovered were hidden in ordinary problems that others ignored. Every delay, every lost shipment, every inefficiency was a chance to provide value. Even when Thomas was old, he continued to walk the docks, observe workers, and improve processes. He taught apprentices that failure was part of growth and persistence was essential. A delayed shipment is not a curse, he said, but a lesson in planning, in foresight, in patience. Thomas Whitaker, though humble in demeanor, had transformed commerce. Merchants trusted him more than banks. Factories depended on him more than local governments. Trade moved faster, safer, and more efficiently because one boy had the courage to see what no one else could. He died peacefully, leaving behind warehouses, freight cars, schedules, and systems that continued to operate long after he was gone. His life proved that a poor boy could rise above circumstance, build an empire from organization, and create opportunity where none existed. The story of Thomas Grayson reminds us that patience, observation, and integrity are more powerful than wealth alone. If you want more Larssen-inspired motivational stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to my channel.